Morning, we are now in chapter 6, Nehemiah. Nehemiah chapter 6. Just like what I shared a while ago in that story, we need to overcome the enemy's attack. And that is one thing that we see here in our study in this book of Nehemiah. That we will always be facing this battle against the enemy. And who's the enemy? Again, in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. In Ephesians 6:12. Let's read this together. Our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the powers of this dark world. That's the enemy. And so we've seen this time and again in our study in the book of Nehemiah, that here it is. There will be this constant attack from the enemy. The devil is always working through creating something. So he can promote fear, he can promote division among the people. At that point in Nehemiah 6, whose purpose is to build the wall. So what did he do? In our study in chapter 4, he used criticism and ridicule as the strategy to destroy the cohesion among the people. So it came from the outside. And now in chapter 5, the conflict within. Their relationship with one another. And now we come to chapter 6. And this time he'll be using several strategies. And so what is the truth about that we need to know about Satan? It's not just that he is the authority here in this world. That we have these powers of this dark world. But just like what it says in 1 Peter chapter 5 verse 8, look at that passage. 1 Peter 5:8. Satan is like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. And then in Genesis chapter 3 verses 3 to 4, God did say, let me tell you first what's going on here. Remember, God told Adam and Eve, don't eat. You can eat everything here except this one. And then Satan comes along in the form of a serpent and he said, God did say, you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden and you must not touch it or you will die. You will not certainly die, the serpent said to the woman. So what Satan did is that, did he really say that? Are you sure about it? No way, you will not die. That is how Satan did it at that point. The serpent deceiving Adam and Eve. And so what God is telling us, the only way we can defeat this enemy, this attack, is by rising up in our faith. After Paul told us that this is the enemy, this is our enemy, what did he say in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 16? In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Look at what he says. The only way you can fight this enemy is by taking that shield of faith. And what is that shield of faith? It is the knowledge of truth. Knowing what the truth is. Because what will Satan do? He will throw darts of lies after lies after lies. And if you do not know what the truth is, what will happen to you? You'll easily be sucked in to buy into the lie. Because you do not know the truth. That's why the Bible says you have to have that shield of faith, the knowledge of truth. And that is what we get from the Word of God. The enemy is there to distract us and to destroy us. That's why we need to be on guard against this. Just like what Paul said in 2 Corinthians chapter 2 verse 11, the problem is we are unaware of his schemes. That's our problem. We are not aware. We are not thinking about the strategies that he is using. So far in our story in the book of Nehemiah, under Nehemiah's leadership, they were able to withstand against the lies of the enemy. Just like what I've said in chapter 4, the enemy will not stop. As long as we are alive on this world, the battle is always there. We will always be fighting this battle. The enemy will not stop. And the Bible is telling each and every one of us, in spite of the fact that the battle is always here, we can overcome. We can prevail against this enemy's attacks. So here in chapter 6, we'll be looking at the different strategies that the enemy used. The first one, subtle persuasion. In verses 1 to 4, when word came to Sanballat, Tobiah, Gaseum, the Arab, and the rest of our enemies that I had rebuilt the wall, and not a gap was left in it, though up to that time I had not set the doors in the gates, Sanballat and Gaseum sent me this message: "Come, let us meet together in one of the villages on the plain of Ono." But they were scheming to harm me, so I sent messengers to them with this reply: "I am carrying on a great project and cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you?" 4 times they sent me the same message, and each time I gave them the same answer. So look at what these friends are doing, the sinister approach by Sanballat and his friends. The strategies that they used before did not work. And now let's do this time. Let's do it this way. Why not use a subtle persuasion? And how does it work? Let's tell them we are your friendly neighbors. And we can cooperate. We can work together. There can be cooperation with us. So they offered to meet Nehemiah in a village halfway between Jerusalem and Samaria. And it's a quiet place where they could make plans on how to work together. That's the scheme. That's the strategy. It's a nice place. We're willing to meet with you halfway. That is what the approach was. And so what is the strategy of the enemy? The enemy's strategy is this: if you can whip him, join them and then take over. And that is the plan. That is their plan. And you know what? Once the enemy gets a foothold in a ministry, what is the enemy? What will he do? He will weaken the work within and ultimately take over, and then the work will fail. While cooperation is always important, especially if it is about the Lord's work, if it is about noble things, we need to be sure that we know who we are partnered with. We need to know whom we are establishing an alliance with. We must cooperate with the right people at the right time for the right purpose. Otherwise, we might be cooperating with a subtle enemy. And Satan is a master deceiver. He is a master deceiver. And has his servants ready to join hands with God's people so he can weaken their hands in the work. And this is where we fail at times, when we become persuaded by the enemy to compromise. Look at that. They tried criticizing, ridiculing Nehemiah. It didn't work. And then they started to create animosity with it. It didn't work. Why don't we come and pretend we're friends? We're not enemy here. We're friends. Inviting him to a conference down on the plain of Ono. By the way, Ono is not the one right at the corner, the Ono Hawaiian barbecue. Ono here is located in a beautiful place in the Gaza Strip. If you've been hearing about the Gaza Strip, that's where Ono is, the seacoast. Nice place, a beautiful resort area. And so that's where they are inviting him. Let's bring him there. It's a nice place. It's a change of view. Look at the scenery right now here in Jerusalem. It's all about distraction. It's not a nice sight to see. It's a change of scenery. Let's bring him there. And that's the lure at this point. But again, just like what Nehemiah said in verse 2, they were scheming to harm me. They're plotting out to destroy me. And look at what he said in verse 3. I am carrying on a great project and I cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you? What is being said here? Nehemiah is seeing through this scheme and now he's refusing their invitation. Remember, it is the fourth time that they've been asking him to meet with them. Fourth time. What does it say? First time did not work. Why not second time? It will be relentless. It will not stop. Continually pressuring him to change his mind, to go along, and he knows what is something wrong. There is something wrong with this. And the sad thing is that some of us give in to repeated pressure. Why not you just come along just once? And then it comes again. Why not try it? It is good. And that's how it works at times. Repeated pressure keep on coming to us. And then suddenly, yes, we learn how to decline the first one, but not the second one. About the third one. When our defenses become weakened, as the enticement continues, it's easy to give in. And you see, the Jews had nothing in common with Sanballat and the rest of the group. There's nothing in common with them. There's no sense cooperating. After all, these people are after stopping them of doing what they're doing. In Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 20, addressing Sanballat, Tobiah, and Gaseum, look at what he says. But as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it. You don't have a heart for this work. You're just in for yourselves. You do not think about Jerusalem. So why will I listen to you? And sometimes these distractions come disguised as harmless options and even good things. We wanted to be your friends. We wanted to cooperate with you. And yet, immediately the first time he knows there's nothing common between him and this group of people. Because they don't have the heart like Nehemiah's heart for rebuilding the wall in Jerusalem. They do not have that in their heart. And how many people have been destroyed? Oh, it's just a fling. It's just a puppy love. And it's harmless. Did you say armless? Are you both armless? Don't have arms? No, we're harmless. There's no such thing like that. Especially when there's no commonality. Oh, it's still just passed away. Oh, look at them. They're so cute together. But you know what it says in God's Word? Amos 3:3. Look at that passage. Amos 3:3. It's there. Let's read this together. How can two walk together if they don't agree? If one has the priority of living a life of faithfulness to God and the other one is not, how can they walk together? If one is wanting to honor God in his or her life and the other one is not, how can it work? That's why there's a warning in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 14 to 16. Do not be yoked together with unbelievers, for what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness? What harmony is there between Christ and Belial? Or what does a believer have in common with an unbeliever? What agreement is there between the temple of God and idols? For we are the temple of the living God. There are so many things that can distract us from what's really important. And at times, they come in subtle persuasion. They appear to be good. They appear to be good. And why is that? 2 Corinthians 11:14. It reveals what Satan does. Look at what it says. Satan masquerades as an angel of light. That's what he does. He will appear to be nice and beautiful and good in its subtle persuasion. But the purpose is to entice us, promising, flattering words, assuring us that that what he proposes will cost us nothing and it will bring you satisfaction, and in the end, when you're hooked into it, just like what Nehemiah said, they're scheming to harm me. That's what Satan does. Scheming to harm us. That's why one of the most helpful things that we can do is to resist the temptation. To remember that God has called each of us to a great task. Every true believer of Christ, whether you're just attending here at Westside or you've been here for many years, we are called for a purpose. And what is that purpose? To make a kingdom impact. I remember back again when I was still working in a company back in the Philippines. 8 years I've been in that work, in that job. I like the job. I've been being promoted so many times. And then the Lord calls me to the ministry, the full-time ministry as a pastor. And so the supervisor, so I tendered my resignation, told her the reason why I wanted to become a pastor. And she told me, you are just few weeks away from another promotion. Why are you leaving? And then I told her, this is where God is leading me. I will become a pastor. But the pastor doesn't pay that much. Look at where you are now, the promotion that you'll be having again. And then she told our department manager. The department manager called me up in the office and said, I heard you're resigning. Why are you resigning? And I told him, I have become a pastor. And then again, he repeated what my supervisor said. It doesn't pay much. I know. I know that. And you know what? At that time, having 2 baby girls, Hannah and Naomi, what it meant to be in the full-time ministry, to go to the seminary to study, it was tempting. To realize you'll be promoted and there will be a pay increase, that's tempting. But again, God has a different plan for my life. And I have to focus on that purpose. The same way with each and every one of us. God has a purpose for our lives. And the lure of temptation is to derail us from that purpose. And at what end? What will be the result? Just like what Nehemiah said, to harm me. Those subtle persuasion. And you know what it says? When it comes on the first time and you are sure about God's will, don't wait for the second one. Whether it's the 4th time or the 50th time, if you know where you should stand, no more reconsideration. You have to be firm. You have to be firm. Decisions based only on opinions can be considered. But if decisions are based on convictions, based on the truth of God's Word, be firm in your stand. Be firm. Otherwise, your decision becomes indecision, and it will lead to instability. So don't reconsider if you are convicted by the truth. Stand in the truth. Don't give in to subtle persuasion. The second one, false accusation. Didn't work. Subtle persuasion didn't work. Let's try this one. False accusation in verses 5 to 9. So it was the fourth time the invitation. Look at the fifth time. Then the fifth time, Sanballat sent his aide to me with the same message. And in his hand was an unsealed letter, in which was written, "It is reported among the nations, and Gaseum says it's true, that you and the Jews are plotting to revolt, and therefore you are building the wall. Moreover, according to these reports, you are about to become the king, and have even appointed prophets to make this proclamation about you in Jerusalem. There is a king in Judah. Now this report will get back to the king, so come, let us meet together." I sent him this reply: "Nothing like what you are saying is happening. You are just making it up out of your head. They were all trying to frighten us, thinking their hands will get too weak for the work and it will not be completed. But I prayed, now strengthen my hands." Notice immediately, the Bible says in verse 5, the fifth attempt. After the fourth time, the enemy will be silent now. No way! It will continue on. Satan will not stop. Again, based on lies, throwing out this false accusation. And what is the accusation? Nehemiah will establish himself as a king. As soon as they're done with the wall, he will set up himself as a king, and the Jews will be looking up to him as a king. And what is that? That's a revolution against the king of Persia. Remember, they were sent there so that they can establish themselves in this place. And then what do? They will still abide by the Persian king, the king of Assyria, Artaxerxes. They will still be looking up to him. And so now, what Sanballat and his friends are saying, no, you're doing this, you're establishing your own kingdom. And when the king of Persia finds out about it, what will happen? He will stop that revolution. He will not allow it to happen. He will not allow that somebody will be there to establish himself as a king. Any hint of rebellion will immediately be stamped out and will be put down. And it is interesting how he did this. Notice in verse 5 how subtle it is. Can you go back, Joshua, in the previous slide? In verse 5, look at that. There is this letter that was unsealed. A letter that was unsealed. If it is an official letter, there will always be a seal. And what is the purpose of being unsealed? So that when people see it unsealed, what do people do when it's not closed, the letter? They will try to pick inside of it. And it's always tempting. I used to work at post office, mail carrier. And when you see from time to time there's a letter that is not sealed, it is always tempting. But I didn't do it because it's a federal offense. But again, that's what he did. He left it unsealed so that when somebody see it, open it up and say, boom, there it is. This guy is starting a revolution. What it says, it has been reported. And who reported it? And then they use the name of Gaseum. Gaseum says it's true. And who's Gaseum? He's a Samaritan just like Sanballat, who's out there to get Nehemiah and the people of Israel. But they say it has been reported. It has been reported, but can it be verified? So he was accusing Nehemiah, according to that letter, an opened letter and sealed letter, that he will be establishing his own ranks and he will be declaring himself as a king. In fact, in verse 7, it says there, you have already appointed the prophets who will declare that, who will make the proclamation. There is already people in that sense. And what is he doing now? Just like what I've said, the false accusation. No verification, kept on being repeated. What happens when it kept on being repeated, it kept on being passed on? It becomes the truth. It starts with a lie. But when it is being passed on and passed on and passed on, and we do not know where we need to stand regarding the truth, what happens to us? We will be carried by that false accusation. And how many church relationships had been destroyed because of this? How many organizations have been destroyed because of this? It has been reported, not even confirmed, and yet it was passed on. Because the enemy is just hovering like a vulture, waiting for such thing, to take advantage of such thing, and there it is. You take it as a truth, in spite of the fact that it's a lie. We must know how to handle false accusations, because the Bible warns us about this. Not only in this passage, in our study in the 2 Timothy, in chapter 3, look at what it says. In verses 2 to 3, for men shall be lovers of their own selves, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers. It will come up. That's why in verse 5, Paul told Timothy, from such, turn away. Turn away from people who will throw out false accusations. We don't have to entertain these false accusations. If you know where you stand and you have integrity before God and you know the truth, learn from what Nehemiah did. And what did he do? Nehemiah chapter 6 verse 8. I sent him this reply. Nothing like what you are saying is happening. You are just making it up out of your head. He didn't try to disprove the accusation. He just merely stated it's a lie. It's a lie. I don't have to entertain it. There's no truth on it. And then in verse 9, what did he do next? Now, strengthen my hands. Turns to God and offer a prayer. After saying that it's a lie, the accusation, turns to God and asks God for help to strengthen him, that he will not be swayed by all these things. And then he went back to work. If we take care of our character, we know who we are in God, we can trust God to take care of our reputation. He can provide us the strength that we need. So, subtle persuasion didn't work, false accusation didn't work. The next strategy, take refuge. Take refuge. So, switches again the game plan. Verses 10 to 14. Nehemiah 6. One day I went to the house of Shemaiah, son of Delaiah, the son of Mehetabel, who was shut in at his home. He said, let us meet in the house of God, inside the temple, and let us close the temple doors, because men are coming to kill you. By night they are coming to kill you. But I said, should a man like me run away, or should someone like me go into the temple to save his life. I will not go. I realized that God had not sent him, but that he had prophesied against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. He had been hired to intimidate me so that I would commit a sin by doing this. And then they would give me a bad name to discredit me. Remember Tobiah and Sanballat, my God, because of what they had done. Remember also the prophet Noadiah, and how she and the rest of the prophets have been trying to intimidate me. So what is the claim now? We have this knowledge, hidden knowledge. Shemaiah, who is a prophet, claiming that he has this knowledge that something will happen in the life of Nehemiah. Look at what it says there in that previous passage. He was shut in. In verse 10, he was shut in. Meaning to say he was in a place, he was secluded by himself. And at times, this is how cults have been started. When people are claiming, I was shut in for several days. I did not have food. It was just be by myself in one room, and there was this revelation. And that is how some cults have been started. And Shemaiah was claiming that he was shut in by himself. Then suddenly it was revealed to him. What was revealed? We need to go to the temple and take refuge. I need to bring you to the temple so you can take refuge. There are people out to get you. They are going to kill you. I remember that. What's that song? They're going to take me away, ha. They're going to take me away, ha. I know it's an old one. That's what he's saying. And the natural response when somebody is taking you to kill you is to take refuge. There's nothing wrong to take refuge. But look at the offer. What is wrong with the offer? Let us meet in the house of God, inside the temple, in verse 10, and let us close the temple doors because men are coming to kill you. By night they are coming to kill you. What is wrong with that? When you look at the Hebrew word, inside the temple means the Holy of Holies. Nehemiah is not a priest. Nehemiah is not a prophet. And the only person that can enter the Holy of Holies is the priest or a prophet. He cannot go inside the Holy of Holies. And Nehemiah immediately realized, why will I go to that place? Why will I find refuge in that place? If God will find it wrong that somebody is trying to kill me and He wanted to protect me, He can protect me here. And not even desecrate that place of Holy of Holies. In fact, in 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 13, King Saul, he's a king, he's the king, but he's not allowed to go to the temple and go to the Holy of Holies and offer sacrifices. He cannot wait for the prophet Samuel to come. And so what did King Samuel did? He went himself inside. And look at what it says in 1 Samuel 13:13. Look at what Samuel said to him. You have done a foolish thing. You have not kept the command of the Lord your God gave you. You're not supposed to go there. And yet you did. Because it was his pride. I'm a king. I can go anything I wanted to do. I can go in there even though I'm not supposed to go in there. And how many times we buy into such thing as well? Nehemiah realizes that the prophet was not really from the Lord. Because a prophet who is really from the Lord will not violate God's commands. That's why in verse 12, he said, in verse 12, Nehemiah chapter 6, that God had not sent him. but that he had prophesied against me because Tobiah and Sanballat had hired him. That's what he discovered, and that's what he knew. When you have the right focus, when you have the right priorities, you will have the courage to do what is right. You have the courage to do what is right. And since Nehemiah is so grounded to the truth, he was willing to trust God, to depend on God. Even though Satan was using at that point, somebody is planning to kill you. His refuge is in God. And he will only listen to what God's command. You see, courage is not the absence of fear, but instead it's a persistence to do what is right, no matter how much you're afraid. We will always be scared. At times, fear will be there, especially when God is telling us to do something that we do not know of. But when we know that is what is right, then we have to follow God. You see, it's not just a matter of saying no to Satan's lies. We must learn how to say yes to the right things, the truth of God. The only way we can learn submission to the authority of God is when we learn to say yes to the truth of His Word. And that's the only way that we can be protected. As we keep the main thing, we will be able to deal with distractions the way Nehemiah did. We must be aware of the schemes. These are some of the schemes. We've already seen several of them. Criticism, ridicule, conflict within relationship, subtle persuasion. All of these things that we've been looking through right now are the schemes of Satan. But when we know who we are as children of God, we have a deep sense of who our true identity as a believer, as a follower of Christ, we can stand firm. Look again, verse 11, Nehemiah 6. Should a man like me run and hide and try to save his life by wrong approaches and unlawful practices? Will I just seek out safety, not thinking what is right and what is truth, just to preserve myself? And it's not about self-preservation. It is about doing what we know what is right before God. And then in verse 14, what did he do again? Just like when he was falsely accused, he turned to God and asked God to strengthen him. And then here it is. When he was seeking refuge, if that is the truth, that somebody is out there to kill him, what did he do? Remember Tobiah and Sanballat, oh my God, because of what they've done. Remember also that prophetess Noadiah and the rest of the prophets who have been trying to intimidate me. What is he doing? I will not resort to revenge. I'm praying to you, God. I know you're the one who will take care of these things. I am entrusting everything in your hand. And I know you will deal with it properly. And so what happens now? Because he was able again to fend this attack. Overcame the enemy's attack. What happened? Verses 15 and 16. So the wall was completed. On 25th of Elul, in 52 days, when all our enemies heard about this and all the surrounding nations saw it, our enemies lost their self-confidence because they realized that this work had been done with the help of our God. What the result? When they were able to overcome the enemy's attack, the wall was built. In fact, there's this picture, the next one. The archaeological findings about the wall. When they start to dig This is part of the wall. This is a portion of the wall. Look at how thick it is. 9 feet, the one on the edge, down below. It's 9 feet wide, that wall. And then another picture, there's how high it is. That's when they dug it during the archaeological findings, and how that wall has helped them during the time. And so look at what happened in that verse. They were able to finish the whole project in just 52 days. And the reason why, just like what it says in verse 16, they have God on their side. God helped them. And look at what the people around them, even their enemies, when they heard about this and all the surrounding nations saw it, they lost their self-confidence because they realized that this work had been done with the help of God. It became a testimony to the people around them. What a big, beautiful picture of the power of Christian witness in a community. Even the foes, even the enemy must agree that God is at work among them. What a testimony, what a witness. When people realize by the way we live that God is on our side, that God is helping us. But we know the enemy will not be true, because later on they will still continue on with their tactics. Just like what I've said, as long as we are here on this world, we'll be facing this struggle. But here is one of the overriding truths. No matter how insistent, persistent, relentless the enemy will be, we can overcome. If we rise up in faith, the enemy will not give up. And God has these wonderful blessings and much encouragement and joy for us along the way. We must never cease battling against the world and the flesh and the devil until we get to heaven. We must not put our guards down. He will use subtle persuasion. He will use false accusation. And as soon as you are ready to go along, what he will do is offer you a refuge. So as we close this morning, let me remind you with these two principles. Learn to say yes to God's priorities. When you know God's priorities, when you know God's purpose, stick to it. Always say yes to it. I heard a story about a Native American who left the reservation to join his cousin who lived in the big city. One day as they were walking down a busy street, the Native American said, "I hear a cricket. I hear a cricket." The cousin who lives in the city, it's all noise, traffic, people's noise. How can you hear a cricket? And then after a short search, the man was holding a cricket in his hand. And then he pulled out a coin in his hand. He threw it down on the ground, and all the people turned to where the noise was. And the man said, "See, people hear what's important to them." Where your focus is, what is important to you, even in the midst of the noise around you. When you are focused into something, that's what you'll be doing. And if your focus is what God had set for your life, no matter what noise around you, and when you're focused on it, you would be able to do it. That's why you have to say yes always to God's priorities. And then the second one, say no to Satan's deception. We have to say no to Satan's deception. Ask the Holy Spirit to help you. Just like what Nehemiah did. Strengthen my hands. Strengthen me, God. Always ask God for help. Always think about what God wanted you to do. God's priorities are always the best for us. Even though what is being offered at times might be looking good, but that's not the best for you. Because when it leads you to get away from God's best, it's not right for you. Is it a friend? Is it a relationship? Is it an activity? Is it money or possessions? Or even your thought life, your career? When the Spirit of God makes it clear, decide how you can begin to say no to those things. Because if you say yes to those things, it will derail you from what is the most important. Just like what Nehemiah did in verse 3, Nehemiah chapter 6, I will not come down. And then in verse 11 he said, I will not go in. What are those two passages saying? I will not give in to what Satan is offering to me. Because I know where I should stand. The enemy will be out there to prevent us from doing what God has called us to do. And God is reforming us. God is transforming us. God is changing us. Because He wanted us to have a kingdom impact to others people's lives. Establishing His kingdom, and He wanted you to be a part of it. Satan is always be there. Always offering us something. But always realize God is enough. God is sufficient. Remember when God's priorities become our priorities? Just like what happened here. Even the enemies realize that they have help from God. So let us ask God to continue to work within us so that He can work through us.